today I will be talking about ear training. I'm going to be basically presenting something that I've spoken about before, but in a kind of much clearer way, I think. What I'm going to be showing you is pretty much how to simplify a tune in your head so that it's very easy to pick out where your 1, 4 and 5 sections are, because this is my kind of approach to backing Irish music on the guitar by ear, is that you really need to get good at being able to just simplify a tune down into 3 chords. And you can do this with any tune. I think you can do it straight away if you get good at it. You can listen to a tune once through and work out a rough idea and then just trust in your ears. And once you've got that 3 chord approach down, you have chord 1 sections, chord 4 sections and chord 5 sections. Then you can start throwing in substitutions, linking chords, jazz chords, all these kinds of things that will convert your 3-chord song into some amazing masterpiece of backing guitar wizardry. But the part that's really important that people seem to find the hardest in a lot of ways is the part where you can just rely on your ears and get 1, 4 and 5 in the right places first. And if you don't get that bit right, you'll never get any of the rest of it right without using a bit of paper and a pen, which, as far as I'm concerned, is not Celtic backing guitar. That's being a composer, you know. So, yeah, basically what I'm going to be talking about is ways that you can kind of get the feel for a chord 1 section, a chord 4 section and a chord 5 section, and the way that you can kind of break a tune down into little chunks and just convert the feeling of them into knowing, oh, that's chord 4 that goes there. Before we get to that, I've got some really good, yeah, exactly, Yvonne, this is your jam, this is your area that you're really good at, so you'll be flying. But yeah, before we get to this, I've got some really exciting news about the Folk Friend website. There will be a Folk Friend website in time for Christmas. It's basically done. There's just a few last couple of things that I'm going to be doing over the next 2 weeks, and then hopefully we'll be launching in about 2 weeks' time. And the play-alongs are all going to be on there. There are 20 play-along videos now. They are done. There are 18 write-ups of why the chords work and sets of chord diagrams for all those play-along videos as well. So there's yeah, going to be some really good stuff on there. And going down the line as well, I'm working on a couple of courses, video courses, and a few other things that will be available through the members area of the site. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. It's coming very soon. It'll be folkfriend.co.uk. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The audio that I'm going to be using today is from the play-alongs, so you'll get a little sneak preview of what they sound like, even if you can't see the chords. But we're going to be focusing on trying not to use the chords and trying to use your ears instead. So I'll just pick one to start with. Play-alongs. Let's have Harvest Home, a hornpipe in D to begin with. So here's what the tune sounds like, played slowly. Turn my speakers back on. So you get the idea. Something like that. So if you were listening to that from complete scratch, the first thing is to work out where your chord 1 and 4 and 5 sections go. And I'm going to tell you like the 2 things that you definitely know before you even start. The thing number 1 is that the chord is in the key of D major, so it's going to start on D, because you pretty much always start on your key chord. Very occasionally you find a tune that doesn't, but they mostly do. So you're basically guaranteed to have D at the start. And I'm going to write the chords as one chord per foot tap. So I tap my foot twice in the bar. So that's 2 foot taps per bar. So that's D and another strum on D for my 2 foot taps, like that. Now we don't know. We've got another bar there and another bar here. We don't know what goes in them yet, but we do know that it always goes from chord 5 normally kicks in on every 7th foot tap. The first time you get to chord 5, it normally lasts for 2 taps, and the second time you get to it, it normally goes chord 5 back to chord 1, and that marks the end of a section. And that is more or less always true for every tune ever. So we can kind of come up with a framework a bit like this, which is what it most likely will do. Something like that. So that's your starting point, and then the trick is now to work out whether these are chord 4 sections or chord 1 sections. They're very unlikely to be chord 5 sections, because you generally only get your chord 5 sections on the 7th foot taps. There and there. You probably wouldn't get a chord 5 here or here or here or here. What I want to do then is think about how chords 1, 4 and 5 feel, and this is all going to be a bit metaphysical today, so sorry about that. The way that I suggest you do it, I'm doing it on a piano because it's easier to do it on a piano than a guitar. You can do it on a guitar, especially if you've got a friend to play you the bass notes. But what you want to do is get a really firm sense of your key centre, so D in this case, and then play your chord 1 over the top of it. And you get that really nice feeling, you know, this is all kind of whole and unified, and it all works well. And then a really good thing to practice is getting used to hearing that chord and going, well, what's my root note? Can I sing it? La. There it is. La. And that is a thing that hopefully you will be able to do. If you can't, then practice it, because for some people it takes longer to get that than others, but you will get it, and it's really, really useful. A lot of people I find as well, you play them a D chord, for example, and they'll go la, because they'll hum the highest pitched note in the chord. And that's the thing that we kind of naturally do. If you hear a chord progression like you naturally hum da 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 da. You naturally pick out the highest notes within a chord and assume that that's the melody, and that's the part that your ear kind of locks onto and remembers as the kind of essence of that chord progression. But for folk purposes, that's really not what you want to do. You want to always focus your ears in on the root notes. So practice hearing a chord and singing the root note. That'll be really helpful. Hi Keith, thanks for tuning in. That's the first thing, and once you get good at doing that and you can hear any chord and go la, la, like that, or you know, sing the root note every time, then the next thing to do is to get used to hearing the chord and being able to go ba ba ba. Those are the 3 notes within that chord. Da da da. Or if it was this one, da da da. You know, you don't have to be good at singing. I'm living proof of the fact that even if your voice is tremulous and nasal, you can still do this and it'll still be really helpful. Once you've got the feeling of just hearing a root note and hearing a chord and being able to sing that chord, the next thing to work on is getting used to the feel of chord 1 to chord 4 as a progression in its own right, and chord 1 to chord 5. So chord 1 to chord 4, I like to think of this as chord 1 is here, chord 4 is there, like I could reach my hand out and I could get chord 4. It's like, it's a bit of a stretch, it might be nicer over there or it might be horrible over there, but chord 4 always feels like it's elsewhere. And chord 5 is where you went, if you went through elsewhere and came out on the other side. Chord 5's like way over there. outside the shop. When I go outside the shop, I go, it's a bit chilly out here, I want to go home, and I go back in the shop where I've got my nice little heater on and it's all toasty. So you get this feeling when you play the chords. There's my chord 1, there's my chord 4, so that's like like that. That's how it feels to me anyway. And then chord 5 is like way over there. I'm coming home now, I've given up, I'm coming back. So that kind of internal feeling of how, if I play a D root note low down, and then I play my G chord over it, that to me feels like it's kind of, it's away. I really can't describe it any better than that, but it's not here, it's there. And then chord 5 feels like it's reached the end of the journey and it's coming back. So it's not as far away, but it's on its way. Well, it's further away. It's on its way. It's returning. And getting used to that feeling for any key is a really useful thing to do. And there's a whole chapter in my book, Backing Guitar Techniques for Traditional Celtic Music, which is kind of, I was trying to get that across, and I set up a load of exercises. There's a whole folder full of exercises where you hear chord 4 going to chord 1 or chord 5 going to chord 1, and it asks you which is it, and the answers are hidden in the back of the book. And of all the things that people email me about with that book, no one ever says I did the ear training and it was helpful. I'm not sure. I think I made a mistake in that I put the ear training in the back of the book, and I should have made it the first thing that anybody does, because it's the most important and the most useful bit in that book, I think. But if you've got a guitar, like this one here, what I cunningly prepared earlier, if you just practice picking a folk key like G major, for example, and play yourself your root note to start with, or your root chord, and then play chord 4 back to chord 1. Just try and get the feeling of what chord 4 feels like in relation to your key centre, and likewise chord 5. And then try doing chord 4, da da da, chord 1, da da dum, chord 4, da da da, chord 1, da da dum, chord 5, da da dum, chord 1, da da dum, something like that. And then if you can, get someone else to pick a chord 1 to chord 4, or a chord 1 to chord 5, or the other way around. Get them to play it to you, not telling you what key it's in, and not telling you which of the two they're doing, and you've got to tell them whether it's chord 4 to chord 1 or chord 5 to chord 1. Because what's really important is the intervals in music. What key you're in is not important. The fact that it's chord 4 is important. The fact that it's C is irrelevant. And once you get the feeling for the chord progressions like that, that's mega handy. That brings me on to my little lovingly hand-coloured in diagram with, I hope you're pleased with the level of technological wizardry that Folk Friend has got to this week. We've got not just one marker pen, but we've actually got 4 different colours, so yeah, really moving up in the world. But this little diagram, this is a D major scale, well, it's a major scale, so if this were D major, it would be da, 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 D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then we'd be back to D. Becomes very uncomfortable for me to sing any higher than that one. But yeah, so the colour coding is the triads, the chords, and the notes that are in them. So your 1 chord, for example, has got notes 1, 3, and 5. And so if it's a chord 1 section, you're going to find that the tune is going to have one of those 3 notes on its dominant beats, most likely. Those are the things that will mark out a section as a chord 1 section. So if I play the beginning of... oh, actually, that's not in D. Let's think of one that's in D. Da, da, da. that's a tune that's in D. I can't remember what it's called, but so the first bar goes like that. So the notes that are in there are basically outlining a D chord at the start. You've got the first, the third, and the fifth, and then the sixth. But the ones that your foot taps on are da, 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 da. So da, 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 like that. Da, da, D and A. So that's your first and your fifth. So if you've got one of those three notes on your dominant beats, basically it's a chord 1 section. Now the reason I'm saying you should think of it as intervals is because if you're looking at the sheet music and you're going, oh, it's got a D there and an F sharp there and an A, so it must be a chord 1 section, the chances for getting that wrong are very high, and I see a lot of things where people have written these kind of chord progressions based on the sheet music. You often see it in music books, and they've written out these chord progressions that have got like half a bar of G here and then a bar and a half of A there and then like half a bar each of D and then G. They just, the function, you know, from looking at the notes that are in it, it makes sense, but to actually play it is hard to play. It doesn't sound good because the rate of harmonic change keeps changing, and it's just like, you can just tell that some person has gone through who doesn't play the guitar probably, and they've like just written out what the sheet music looks like it's saying the chords should be. The way to do it instead is to get the feel for what those notes feel like in relation to the root, and you'll do that by singing the chords and knowing that chord 1 is da da dum and how that feels, and then singing that chord 4 is da da dum. So there's my chord 4 notes, the green ones. 4, 6. Ah, I've made a mistake on my diagram actually. Oh dear. Right, bear with me a minute, I'm going to have to fix that because that's going to completely mess up my whole explanation. Sorry about that. But yeah, if you've got the feel of singing chord 4, then if those notes are on your dominant beats in the tune, then you'll know it's a chord 4E section. And likewise with chord 5, although there won't be chord 5 sections apart from at the ends. So it's really only the notes of chord 1 and chord 4 that are important. Apart from one very important time, which I'm going to come back to in just a second. But I'll just write this down quickly before I go any further, because that'll make the next bit a lot easier to follow. Right, there we go. That's better. So yeah, if you look at this, notes 1, 3 and 5 make up the 1 chord. Notes 4, 6 and 1 make up chord 4. So if you've got a section where the dominant beats within that section are mostly on notes 4 and 6, that is going to be a chord 4 section, basically guaranteed. Obviously if the main note's note 1, then it's probably a 1 section, so it's these two that indicate that it's a 4 section. If you have chord 5, you'll notice that the 5 note can appear in 1 sections because the 5 note is in a 1 chord. But the really important thing here is the 7th note. The 7th note is not in any of the other chords, it only appears in chord 5. And the 7th note in Irish music, if you're in a major key, you'll find the 7th note almost always only crops up in chord 5 sections. It'll just be in the last bar, the last of every 4 bars, basically. So bar 4, bar 8, bar 12, bar 16. That'll be where you find the 7th note. So if I just, let's play Cafuncan Jig, which I often use as an example. There's my my C sharp, which is the 7th note, just there. So that's the first bar. Oh, it's actually in the 2nd bar, but only very briefly, and it's not, crucially, it's not on a dominant beat there. It's between 2 dominant beats. So if I break the tune down, I'm only going to play now the foot tap notes, because those are the ones that I use to select the chords. I disregard all the others. So that's what I'm hearing, basically, to pick the chords with. Only the foot tap ones. So you can think of a tune as notes that are on the foot tap beats, the important ones, and all the other ones tend to be just little runs of notes that link those up. That's basically the formula for how Irish tunes work. So those are my important ones in the first bar. That's my important ones in the second one. And then let's go on a bit. So in the last bar there, I had a dominant beat. My dominant beats there were like that. So a dominant beat with the 2nd note on it. Second note is a chord 5 section indicator. And lo and behold, we had a dominant beat with a 2nd note on it in the bar where it goes from chord 5 back to chord 1. And you'll find that is true in pretty much all Irish music. It'll always have either the 7th note or the 2nd note. I was hoping that the 7th note would be there, but it turns out it's the 2nd in that one. Let me think of another tune that might do it. Let's do the one I was playing before. That hasn't got a 7th note in it anywhere. Yeah, the 7th note is not a very common note, as I said before. That one's not got a 7th note in it anywhere. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm sure you get my point. You can break the tune down into just a framework where you're just listening to the dominant beats. You get the feel for which chords contain which notes by setting yourself a root key, playing chord 1 and singing the notes, da da da. Then you go to chord 4, da da da. Over there, back at home, going outside, over there, back at home, something like that. And by just thinking of the feeling of those chords and just listening to the dominant beats, you can pick out where your chord 4 sections go relatively easily. Yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to say. You can take this same exercise, once you get really good at doing it with the major keys, you can take it and apply it to the other modes. So, related to the example in D major, D major has got the same chords and the same notes in it as E Dorian. Ooh, that was weird. There's a button on my keyboard that makes a silly noise. Yeah, so if I put this on D Ionian, you can see D Ionian, same notes as E Dorian. You can get one of these, by the way, the amazing mode wheel from Finale Guitar. They're very useful, and they're available at finaleguitar.co.uk/shop. Go and check them out if you want a handy thing that shows you the chords for any key. But yeah, so if I was doing an example in E Dorian, the chord options that are available are the same options, the same 7 possible chords as D major, but the main ones for a Dorian tune are going to be E minor. You're still kind of looking for 1, 4 and 5 sections, but you'll find that the main chords in E Dorian are going to be E, the 7th chord, which is D major, and the 5 chord, which is B minor. So the 5 chord still comes back to chord 1. Same deal as before, you know, every time, 7th time your foot taps, you're going to put in a chord 5. The 5 chord in any mode which isn't Ionian can also be swapped to its related major, because if your 5 chord is a minor chord, you can play its related major instead of it, and it'll still work just as well. So in the case of B minor, our chord 5 here, we can play D major instead of it, because any minor chord's related major is the one that's 2 above it in the same key. So our main chords are going to be E minor, D major and B minor are used interchangeably. Basically, they're so similar to one another. They've got 2 notes in common out of 3, so you can use those 2 interchangeably. And our chord 4 is going to be A major. So let's take Morrison's Jig as an example, which goes... something like that. I'll play it better on the guitar because I'm not a pianist, but... something like that. So in the case of that one, it's the same deal as before with regards to degrees of the scale and which chords they fit in. Our chord 1 is E minor, our chord 4 is A major, and our chord 5 is B minor. So you can do the same exercise for a Dorian tune. So like with this one, set out your key centre there, your slightly out of tune key centre, and then play your E minor chord, da da dum. There's that one. Your 4 chord in Dorian feels like over there, and over there might be quite a nice place to be. So we've got a very optimistic 4 chord, da da dum. So if I play that over my key centre, do 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 do. There's my chord 4. So that's the feel of chord 4. It's got this kind of optimistic over there kind of thing. Chord 5 still sounds like far away, coming home. Do 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 do. Da, da, da. I can't sing that high at all. Da, da, da. Something like that. But yeah, so you can do the same exercise with the other modes, just convert it so it's there 1, 4 and 5. With our 5 chord, if we're in Dorian, we've got chord 7 and chord 5 that are interchangeable. So chord 7 would be 7, 2 and 4 as the notes in that chord. But basically, the ones that indicate to you that chord 7 could go there is like it's a chord 5 section. So if you hear the 7th note or the 2nd note, you know that it's a chord 7 or a chord 5 section. And if you hear the root note, the 3rd and the 5th, you know it's a chord 1 section. And if you hear the 4th, the 6th, then you know it's probably a chord 4 section. So let's take a little example with Morrison's. Burn through a lot of paper this way, but we're going to start the tune on E minor because we're in E Dorian, so we want to hear our key chord to start with. It's basically guaranteed. Then the first bar is going to be that. Then we've got 2 mystery bars, and then we're going to have chord 5 or chord 7. They're interchangeable. So that's going to be I'm going to put B minor chord 5 at the end there. So we've got da da diddle do. So then again we're going to break it down to just the foot tap notes. So that becomes like that. Now that is root 5th. Sounds very rooty. It feels very rooty. And if you've been doing the exercise of singing your notes, hopefully you'll be able to feel that feels rooty, like a turnip or a beetroot. Da 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 dum. So this next bar, we've got 2 dominant notes in it. Da da dum, ba ba bum. That first bit, ba. Your root note is basically the dominant beat in that, so that's going to be E minor, chord 1. Da ba da. Then we've got da da dum. So you'll notice there, that's, if this was our root note, then that is our second. So we've got a dominant beat with a second note on it. If there's a dominant beat with a second note on it, you know it's a chord 5E kind of section. So we're going to put in D there. We could put B minor. The reason I'm not going to put B minor is because switching between E minor to B minor, which is a bar chord, fast, going to be very, very hard. So I'm going to put D there instead because it's easier to play. So da 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 da. There we've got another one that's just a root and a 5th. Da 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 da. And there's our chord 5 bit. Yeah, so this applies. This same principle applies in all the modes. Let's take an example with another mode as well. Let's have Mixolydian, because I'm sure you can work out for yourselves the Aeolian. It works exactly the same. You just take what we've done with Dorian and apply it to Aeolian. But the only difference with that would be that your chord 4 in Aeolian is minor. So if it were a tune in E Aeolian, then your chord 4 would be A minor instead of A major. Da, 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 dum. So you could repeat the exercise with the Aeolian mode just by changing your chord 4 to a minor chord. Anyway, Mixolydian is something of a special case in a way. Let's take a D Mixolydian again. So that's our chord 1. In Mixolydian, you don't really find chord 4 sections as such. Mixolydian has chord 1 sections, chord 7 sections, and chord 5 sections. Again, chord 7 and chord 5 are effectively the same chord. They're interchangeable because chord 7 is chord 5's related major rather. But it's very rare in the Mixolydian mode that you hear a section that really jumps out as being a chord 4 section. Let's just take an example, and you'll see what I mean. Let's take Humours of Ballyloughlin for an example. Something like that. So, if we get the feel for our chords first, we've got chord 1, D major, da da dum. We'll do chord 4 while we're here, it would be G, da da dum, and chord 5 would be A minor, da da da, and then back to D again. Chord 7, if we There's our chord 1 again, a bit higher up. Da 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 dum. And chord 7 is like da da dum, da da. It kind of feels like a little drop. Da da dum da dum da dum da dum da. You know, so that, yeah, if chord 1 is here, chord 4 is there, and chord 5 is too far and it's coming home again. Chord 7 is like still here, but it's gone down into the basement. Anyway, so if we break the tune down again, we've got da 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 dum. So the dominant beats da 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 is that basically. So if we look at our diagram, that first note da da, that's a fifth. So starting on the fifth. Fifth is chord 1, red. Da da da. So then we've gone down to the 4th. We could say that was a chord 4 bit, so we could do. That would be fine. But as I was saying before, I tend to avoid chord 4 in Mixolydian. I tend to mainly play chords 1, 7 and 5. And I'll tell you a bit about why the reason for that is. It's because Mixolydian is very similar to Ionian, and in order to differentiate it, you'll find that the 7th note, the flattened 7th, which is the one that separates them, is going to be in the tune a lot. And that means as well that I like to make it very clear in the chords that 7th chord, that flattened 7th chord, try and get it in there as much as I can. And so I tend to use it instead of chord 4. So I do da 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 dum with C, like that. Anyway, next bit of the tune. So we've got da da dum bum. So dominant beats E and C. 2 to 7. 2 and 7, both very blue, dabba dee dabba die. They are both indicators of a chord 5 section, which is the same thing as a chord 7 section. So, seeing as my main beats are, one of them's on a C, I'm going to play a C chord to match that. Like that. So in Mixolydian it kind of becomes a bit simpler really, because you can basically usually break up all of a Mixolydian tune into just chords 1 and 7 if you want. Yeah, so that's my slightly special case for Mixolydian. You will occasionally find a section that really sounds chord 4-y. On the subject of sections that really sound like a certain chord, I say that you can break down tunes always into just 1, 4 and 5, and in the case of Mixolydian just 1 and 7. Sometimes you'll find a tune, particularly with more recent modern kind of tunes, where there's an arpeggio in a section. So, like for example, that's a tune, a tune which has a name like the something barn dance or the something dance. What is it called? Does anyone know? English tune? Don't know, can't remember. Anyway, not important. But that one starts with an arpeggio. And it's completely outlining a D chord. So for example, if you didn't play the D there, it'd sound dreadful. But you'll also find tunes like the Glasgow Reel, or Tamlin as it's sometimes known. That tune outlines some chords other than chord 1, and so you really have to play them. So it goes So you've got, that's a G minor. That one there, that's the arpeggio of oh, sorry, I'm playing it in the wrong key. Bear with me. Right, so that's a G minor. So that one there, that is a D sharp chord being outlined. So you really have to play that D sharp there to follow it. And the next bit goes, that one is F, so you really have to play F there. Oh, sorry, it's E flat if we're in G minor, isn't it? Yeah. So if you get an arpeggio in a bar, obviously follow the arpeggio. Stands to reason, doesn't it, really? You won't find that very much in Irish music, because traditional, older Irish music was kind of written before harmony instruments were really part of it. It was written for melody instruments being played at probably over drones. So outlining chords was not a thing that was done because the harmony, or not a thing that was consciously and intentionally done all the time like it is in modern music, because the harmony wasn't considered as like an integral part of it. It was just about writing a melody. So you'll find a lot more little scale runs and things like that, and a lot fewer arpeggios of chords. Yeah. Anyway, that is basically what I wanted to say. So the main things to take away from this are do your ear training exercises because they're really handy. Practice getting the feel for chord 1 and chord 4 and chord 1 and chord 5, changing between those. Get a friend to play them back to you, see if you can spot them correctly. Once you can, then start singing the notes within those chords as well. And if you can get to the point where you can go, this is a root note, doesn't matter what root note it is, just pick one at random, then my root chord would be da da dum, my chord 4 would be da da da, my chord 5 would be da 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 da, there's my root note again, an octave up from where I originally sung it. That kind of thing. So you can sing them and feel them in your head without needing to play them or have someone else play them to you. That is what you're aiming for, and that will be the most useful thing ever for when it comes to picking out the chord 1, 4 and 5 sections. Once you have picked out your 1, 4 and 5 sections, then you can start working in all the substitutions, the jazz chords, the linking chords, whatever you want to do, all the good stuff. But you can't get that right unless you have a really clear feeling for where chord 4 or something related to chord 4 should go, and you've really got the structure of having chord 5 in the right places chord 5 in the right places. Because without that chord 5 in the right places, your sections won't sound finished, and it'll just lose its kind of harmonic structure, which makes the whole thing work, and that's what makes it satisfying to the listener. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful. You might find it useful to make yourself a little diagram like this as well. I'm really pleased with this sort of colour-coded format. I think it's useful. So from this regard as well, the other thing you can take away is that if you hear a dominant beat with notes 4 or 6 on it, then it's definitely going to be a chord 4 section. If you hear a dominant beat with notes 7 or 2 on it, it's definitely a chord 5 section. Well, I say definitely, obviously never say never, you know, but you'll probably find dominant beats with notes 2 or 5 on them will probably only appear at in a chord 5 bit, you know, a 7th foot tap bit where chord 5 has to go anyway. And if you hear anything else, then it's probably a chord 1 section, which means basically play whatever you want, because as I've outlined again in my book, pretty much any chord in a key is a substitute for chord 1 in some way. Chord 1 substitutes to chord 6 because it's its related minor. It substitutes to chord 4 if you want. It substitutes to chord 4's related minor. It substitutes to chord 3 because that's the minor chord that's 2 notes above chord 1. You can always substitute a major chord to the chord that's 2 above it, as well as 2 below it. So that's given us 1, 3, 4, 6. All of those are substitutes for chord 1. you can also get away with playing chord 2 in a chord 1 section. It sounds cool. So yeah, basically if it's a chord 1 section, play whatever you want. Yeah, Yvonne, I kind of drone in my head to tell me what the next chord is. Yeah, I totally agree. You should always try and have the key centre in your head, whatever you're hearing. Oh, that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it might have been a bit vague, but yeah, Mixolydian really, you're really just mainly listening for chords 1 and 7. You won't find many chord 4, definitely chord 4 sections. Yeah. But yeah, I like what you say about having the drone in your head. If you can keep the key centre like firmly rooted in your kind of music memory, what you're really doing is comparing an incoming stream of notes against a key centre and using that knowledge of what interval they are in relation to the key centre to tell you what chord would fit with them. That's effectively what you're doing when you listen to a tune and pick out chords by ear, you know. So keeping that drone of your key centre kind of solidly in your mind is really, really handy. And I think as well, that's a big part of why tunings like Dadgad and Drop D are so popular, where you've got a nice low ringing note that you can leave under most of your playing, because it gives you that real clear feeling of what your root is, and that's what you're using to interpret the music. You know, a melody is kind of meaningless unless you've got a sense of a note against which to interpret the notes of the melody. You know, if I play a phrase like if I'm in the key of G major, that's, you know, a nice cheery little thing. If I'm in the key of E minor, it's a much darker thing. And if I play just over the root note, I hear that as a negative phrase. If I play it over the G root note, it's a very optimistic phrase. If I play it over an A root note, it's sort of uncomfortable, you know. So a phrase is only meaningful when you interpret it based on the root note. So yeah, keeping that drone going in your head, really, really good thing to be doing. Thank you, Maria, for tuning in, and it's nice to see, I've not seen you on here before, so thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back every Friday 5:30 as well. Has anyone got any ideas for things they'd really like me to make, to talk about on these videos, or anything that they think would be a good thing to do for Folky Fridays, by the way? Because I've got a few ideas, of course, but I'd be keen to do anything that people really want to hear about. Anything you'd like me to go back over, or oh, I've got some other exciting news as well, actually. I've just finished writing a book of Dadgad tabs. There's 10 Irish tunes arranged for Dadgad guitarists, and it'll be like my first book of tabs, where you get like a little bit of history about who wrote it, or what it's named after, or something like that. A little guide to how to play everything and how to pick things and techniques at the beginning, and then a tab with chord diagrams for all of the arrangements. And there'll be an audio download with it as well, in which I play them all, so you can hear what they sound like played slowly. So that's going to be out in time for Christmas as well, if you're looking for an unusual Christmas gift for your loved ones or yourself. It'll be launched the same time as the new website, so probably 2 or 3 weeks from now, just in time for Christmas. If you're not already on the Folk Friend Facebook and the Folk Friend mailing list as well, I'll put a little link to the Folk Friend Facebook. That's where I post the links for these live streams before I start them, and I'll also have news of what's going on with the new site and stuff. And there's going to be a special offer on membership as well for people that have followed the channel for a while. So follow the Folk Friend Facebook and sign up for the mailing list as well while you're there. There's a tab on there to join the mailing list if you want to get a... I don't send emails very often, I rarely have time, but every now and again you get a little bit of news about what the shop's doing, and special offers and stuff sometimes, lessons are cheaper if you get them off that sometimes. Those kinds of things. Basically, it's so I can spam you when I write a new book, but, but there are occasionally, like, there's a lot of free stuff on there as well, and, you know, bits and bobs. So get on that if you're interested. Thanks, Yvonne. Cheers. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all very much for tuning in. As ever, I hope this has been helpful. If you've got any ideas, just drop me an email, info@finaleguitar.co.uk. I'm happy to make videos about anything, songs or whatever. Just anything that I can help you with, let me know. I'm more than happy to do it. Yeah, I'll see you all next week. Thanks to Brian, Yvonne, John. Thanks to John for tuning in, I think for the first time. Hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you to Maria for tuning in. Come back soon. And thanks to Keith as well. Yeah, I'll see you all next week.